Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
The Wall Street Journal reports that the Supreme Court intervened on the Trump administration's Priority Tuesday, but sidestepped another, allowing restrictions on military service by transgender individuals to be put in place while avoiding, for now, the White House's bid to cancel protections for some young illegal immigrants. So what we're taking up today is this transgender troop situation. Now, we've already talked about this before. So the way that we're approaching this today is this particular decision by the court, which, mind you, is important to note. The action is not a ruling on the merits of transgender restrictions and justices. Ultimately, the court declined to take up full considerations on the case right now while lower court proceedings continue. So technically, all they were doing is saying the lower court's decision to put this ban on hold while those cases are being heard is not right. Now, many will tell you that that's a good indication then perhaps of how the court may vote if they take up this as a full case. So we're going to move forward kind of looking at it through that lens. Why do you care? Maybe you're not a member of the LGBT community or not a supporter of it. Maybe you don't care who's allowed in the military. I'll pull it back way big picture, and Lance will have a couple things about why you care as well, I'd imagine. But to me, it comes down to, what is the Supreme Court's job? Do we understand the way the government is supposed to work? Because understanding it allows us to make sure it's working for us. If we don't understand it, then how can we know if it's working right? And it seems pretty simple. So we can't begin this important conversation today without
your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Well, of course, the main issue is we have to defend the rights of all if we want our rights defended. So that's to me the short and sweet of it, is that why should you care? Because if you don't defend the rights of others, then there will come a time when your rights are under attack and you're going to be looking for help and support, and you may not get it. So in the big picture, I think that is the biggest reason why anybody should watch these types of decisions towards any group of people, is that it says we're supposed to protect the rights of all citizens. It doesn't specify as to some citizens are more protected than others or less protected than others. So there you go. So let's get into it.
Yeah, that's you're done. That's the argument.
Well,
we got it.
It's that simple.
We laid out the why do we care and the argument.
There's nothing more to it than that.
So, we're gonna approach this from the bigger portion of the idea of the Supreme Court weighing in on things where it might be a little ambiguous, the meaning of certain things. So there's two places in the Constitution
but can't the Supreme Court at any point in time render a decision?
Yes.
They don't have to wait for it to go through the court system.
That's correct.
So
we're going to talk about that, right? Because we're going to.
Okay. Well, I didn't know.
We're going to make sure that people understand, because I think that's one of those things.
Because we went to our separate corners in pre-show because you wanted to share all your ideas with me, and I said no because I don't agree with you, so that we could have this out in public, so either one of us could prepare for the other one's arguments. You got to think off the top of your head here. So I didn't know that you were going to bring that up later. But the Supreme Court, in my humble opinion, is sidestepping an issue. They have every right to step in and rule on this. They don't have to wait for the lower court's rulings. They have the option to.
Right.
They're in the right.
Oh, yeah, but they don't have
They're in the right to do this, but everyone understand the Supreme Court doesn't have to wait. You know, this thing that your fourth grade teacher taught you or your high school government teacher taught you, that it has to go through a certain system to get to the Supreme Court, is hogwash. The Supreme Court can pick and choose a case anytime they want at any point in time in the process.
Article 3.
Now, you do have to set it up so it goes into a federal court.
Yeah.
But after that, it's.
I mean, you're right in that it's very plain and simple that if they wanted to, they could weigh in at any time, because Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution, Section 2, opening sentence, it says this: the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States and treaties made or which shall be made. And then it goes on to explain any law made by Congress, any law made by any state, any law in regards to multiple states interacting, basically anything ever where the United States federal government has, authority in jurisdiction, it has the right to intervene. Or where there are states that are in conflict, it has the right to intervene. So yes, Lance is right from the point of they could weigh in and say, bam, this is, we're hearing arguments and we're ruling. We don't care that they haven't finished. It's just one of those accepted kind of things where the Supreme Court, of course, gets tons of requests all the time to hear cases, and it's just not possible for them to hear everything. So they have to be selective. So typically their policy has been, we'll wait until lower courts, have a verdict. And then if it's appealed and we think that there's room to hear more arguments, we'll take it up. Generally speaking, that's been the process. So just so people understand, it's not that the courts tries to be, mean and says, oh, no, we don't want to do this because we're lazy. It's, a lot of times, even once we're told they're going to take it up, we have to wait a year or more before they do. We've had that, for a long time where we have to wait a long time because they're, takes them a while to do these things. So there's your judicial section. It does lay out, of course, that the trial of all crimes, except in cases of impeachment, shall be by jury, and that trial shall be held in the state where said crime shall have been committed. So.
But our issue we're looking at today is not necessarily a crime.
Right. Yeah. We're not looking at something that's a criminal offense. It's more of it's more about presidential powers, we would say, right? And how those presidential powers are able to interact with the liberties that we are guaranteed in the Constitution, which brings us, Lance, yes? Then to the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. After the first sentence, it reads the following: no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. And to me, that's the strongest. If I'm a Supreme Court justice and I'm hearing this transgender military ban situation, to me, Section 1 of Article 14, that right there, what I just read, that's the strongest argument of we would be stepping on the privileges of citizens of the United States. However,
because the opening that you didn't read says all persons born or naturalized in the United States.
Yes.
So there you are. All persons born and naturalized in the United States have equal protection under the law. Very simple.
Well,
very simple.
Even though it doesn't read, and this is where the problem comes into play. Like, as we've talked about with the Second Amendment, the simple lack of a comma in one place changes the entire meaning of, could change the entire meaning of how you interpret it. As Lance read there, the first sentence is all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. And then it goes on to read the part that I said: no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property.
But it doesn't say if I was born here, male, female, purple, yellow, red, green, whatever, then I have a different set of right. If I was born here or naturalized here, I'm a citizen. And as a citizen, I have equal protection under the law.
Yes.
Bingo, bango, bongo. Right there. So that's simple.
Nor deny
that's what it is.
To any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So, and this is where then the counter argument, right, of the case being made, there's a couple different, there's I'm sure a ton of different counter arguments. So forgive me that I'm not going to run through them all. I'm going to run through the ones that I think are the strongest counter arguments to this. Argument number one that you'll hear a lot, which is the 14th Amendment this section 1, was written not at a time that had anything to do with transgenders. That is not what they were thinking when this was written, right? This is the whole purpose. As Cornell Law School outlines, the 14th Amendment addresses many aspects of citizenships and the rights of citizens. So
of course it was taking it into consideration, because it says if you're a citizen, it doesn't stipulate what kind of citizen you are or what type of citizen. So I would argue that yes, it does take into account transgenders. That's the beauty of the way the Constitution and the amendments are written, is that it enables us to envelop things that maybe they weren't thinking of, but they didn't say certain citizens. They just said all persons born or naturalized are considered citizens. So they were, I would argue, taking into account someone that we now call a transgender person. Because if that person, transgender person, was born in the United States or as a naturalized citizen, then they're talking about them.
Then they cannot be denied the equal protection of the laws. And this is where, to me, the stronger argument comes in. So that was the first argument, right? And as Lance pointed out, I think there's the big weak spot there is, you're right, they may not have been thinking of that, but they wrote it in a way that encompasses anybody ever. I mean, that's the way this is written, right? Is anybody who's a citizen is counted in this.
Right.
So from that standpoint, that first argument, yeah. The second argument, though, and this is where the wording is important, okay, we have first, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges of citizens of the United States. Okay, so privileges, that's very gray from the standpoint of that's not saying law, it's saying privileges. Well, what are the privileges? Well, I don't know. I mean, that's an area where there's a wide range that could be used for or against, saying, for example, the privilege of military service. It is a privilege. It's not a right. And that's where we bring in the second part of it, right? Nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. And this is, to me, where the big second point comes in. There is no law in this country that guarantees anybody the right to enlist in the military. There is no law. So, yes, it protects all citizens, giving them equal protection of the laws. So in order for them to be protected, there has to be a law that protects that thing, is a way that this could be interpreted. And to me, I would imagine if I was, if I had been educated in the law and had a little bit better understanding of this, if I was a Supreme Court justice, that would be the strongest counterpoint to this is, justice, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It's simply put, there is no law. So until Congress takes action on this, they're not guaranteed the right to serve. In other words, the military could deny anybody the right to serve for any reason because there's no law that says you have that right. According to the Constitution, there's nothing in there about your right to military service or any law that exists today.
You finished?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know I didn't want to interrupt you. I mean, I'm really trying to be nice.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I agree with that.
You were kind of looking at me like you're going to say anything. Well, I wasn't going to say anything because I sometimes get blamed for interrupting you. So I was trying to be nice there.
You do?
Anytime. Oh, yes. I hear it all the time. But the bottom line is you're talking about military service. That argument totally goes out the window when you're talking about a group that can force me to serve. Okay. If you can make a law that forces me to serve, then all of a sudden, all that privilege and every other argument that you made goes out the window. Because if you can make me do something, then I think it's only common sense in the words of our founding fathers that we should then follow through on that. Okay. And by following through, I mean, I should have the right to serve. I should have the privilege because you're making me do this. So then I should have the option of serving or not serving if I want to. Not when I get drafted, but in times of peace or in times when because have been at war. Even during times of war when we have a fully voluntary military, which I don't want to get into that political stream because I'm not sure how many people actually are really volunteering when they have no other option before them, because
we've talked about that,
so we get into that.
We show up in the school and we show you this is a good way, good path. And it's not to say it's a bad path either. It's just to say that
your parents have told you they have no money, and at 18 you have to get out.
So
you have to fend for yourself. And so, hey, look, we can keep you all poor over here, and then we can entice you to volunteer in the military because you really have no other viable option to keep yourself alive. What a great country we live in. But I don't want to go too far down that. But if you're going to have the ability to draft me, then all of a sudden you can't deny me the right to serve. I think that's just a common sense argument. And I understand the legal side of it. I understand the words you read.
Right.
And I understand your point, but I think it goes out the window when we're talking about a group that has the right to force me to serve.
So we're going to continue this important conversation on, because it's really, hopefully as we've highlighted, it's bigger than just this transgender military ban situation. Because really what we're talking about applies in a lot of cases of, okay, if there isn't a law that guarantees you a right, then do you have the right to be protected by the law for that thing? And this is something that, for what it's worth, I mean, hopefully people know this is a debate that's been going on forever, because the reality is it's nearly impossible to write a comprehensive document that will foresee every situation ever.
And nor did the founding fathers think they had. And hopefully we'll share with you here in the second half of the show some of their comments.
We'll be getting to that. So there's a lot still to come, but we've been talking so far today about this transgender military ban. And moreover, like I said, pulling back to this larger picture of what is the Supreme Court's role in all of this. Where do they have jurisdiction? How does it come into play? Are they moving in the right direction? But we want to take a moment and tell listeners what we're trying to do here by having this conversation, Lance. So what is TrueChat's mission as a network?
Well, we try to educate people by having honest, open, and respectful conversations. Some people say educate. I just feel like saying edumacate today.
Okay.
Yeah. We try to educate you.
Okay. Try to educate you?
Yes.
On, through open, honest, and respectful conversations,
right,
which I think we're having today. Little dissent. We don't have a lot of those.
Dissent is good for the soul.
Yeah.
I just said that.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't paying attention. See how respectful I'm being, folks?
Man.
Oh, what was that? Oh, I didn't hear you. I was just waiting to talk again. But if you think that we're not upholding that mission, you can send an email to ethics@truechat.org, ethics@truechat.org. Of course, we want you to engage. Where do you fall on this? We've laid out some of what the Constitution says. Can you see this point? Let's go for that for a second. Say that you support the idea that it's okay for transgenders to serve, just for a moment. And then you come to this last part here. Within its jurisdiction, the equal protection of the laws. Does that change things for you? Or does what Lance said, where, well, I'm forcibly being compelled to serve in certain situations, so that changes it? So let us know at TrueChat.org on social media. So Lance, here's what my thought came to when you were talking about that, being compelled to serve. So if we can't compel people who are transgender to serve, then are we all good? If the president's ban read as the following, roughly along these lines, I know this is not worded legally, I'm just saying that if a person identifies openly as transgender, then they may not serve voluntarily or forcibly in the United States Armed Services. In other words, if we had a draft, they couldn't be drafted. So we're not saying you have no right to be in the military. You're eliminated from that right, both voluntarily or through us compelling you. Now, are we okay? Because we're not saying, well, we can force you to if we got to have you, but.
And what if we get into a fight that there are some people in the country who do not wish to participate because they don't think it is a fight we should be involved in, then what's going to stop it? If we do that, how many people then will start to identify as transgender? Be a good boost for the LGBT community.
Well, we saw that.
But see, I think that's wrong. So, I mean, my answer is yes, I guess the president could do that and say something like that, but I don't think that is in the best interest of the nation. We don't want to keep dividing the country. We are all from one race called the human race. And we should therefore, as citizens, all be treated the same. We shouldn't have special laws for groups of people.
So we've already experienced, I mean, it's interesting because what we're talking
the
about.
laws we should have should be to protect that those smaller groups of people all have the same rights as the majority groups. Every group should.
We shouldn't have a class system.
I don't even think we're groups, man. We're the human race. We're all the same. What we have in common is that we've all either been born here and are a citizen. We didn't have a choice. We were born here, so we're a citizen. Or we decided to come here and we are naturalized. And so we wanted to live here. So we're all citizens. That's what we have in common. The rest of this stuff is immaterial. All that matters is that we're all citizens, and therefore we should all be treated the same by the law. Yeah, I understand we're not, but that's what we're striving to do. In my mind.
Okay. I've got some notes for you. Cause I've been writing stuff down cause I'm thinking a lot of things and I'm afraid I'm going to forget them.
That's my job, making you think.
Yeah. So before the break, you had said it's common sense, the compel thing. So I talked a little bit about how, well, for example, take right now.
But you're violating my rights. If the president said, we're not going to draft these people, that's a violation of my rights.
You have the right to be drafted.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. If we are equal, we all have the right to be drafted into military service.
Then
so
by that
I'm being I'm being treated as less than a citizen.
Okay. But by that same token, then we go back to Vietnam War, right? Mm-hmm. And we go back to conscientious objectors and we say, those are no go. You live here. You got to serve.
Yep.
I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what you believe. You got to fight.
Right.
We all got to fight. I mean, are we saying that? Because now we're infringing, right, on their personal beliefs and their belief that it's not okay for them to fight this fight.
Well, there were a number of people that tried to classify that way, and there were a number of people that were still forced to serve.
Sure.
Or went to jail because the government said, no, what your religion doesn't really feel that way.
Right.
So it wasn't necessarily a get out of jail free card.
I know it wasn't. I'm saying it didn't. For some people it worked. For other people it didn't. Some people tried to use it when they shouldn't. And some people tried to use it and weren't allowed to. And they were being honest. It was truly a direct conflict with what they felt down inside. And they still were told, either you're going to jail or you're going to go fight. Those are your choices. Or some of them chose, right? Then
unless your parents were rich and then you got to
run away
to go to school.
Yeah. Or you have the money to pay a doctor to maybe say, well,
or your daddy's a senator
they're not maybe as physically fit as we think,
and let you serve in a National Guard unit that would never see duty in South Vietnam.
But my point here is,
my point is you can't go, well, what if, because there's not a fair system.
But to
answer your question, no, I would say yes, they've got to serve, but we don't do that.
I just think we're taking that step of infringing.
We let people out all the time for other reasons. So until you clear up all those other reasons that we let people out, then you have to allow for conscientious objectors as well. Would be my counter argument to you, because we said in Vietnam, which you used, if you stayed in school, which it was a different time. For the most part, only wealthy people's children went to school. So if you had enough money, mommy and daddy could keep paying your tuition. You could stay in school for the duration of the war and never be eligible for the draft. You could declare for conscientious objector. There were doctors who were not supporters of the war, who you could go and get a medical deferment from. or if your dad, and I'm sorry, I don't mean, because very few women were in influential positions back in the 60s because of unequal treatment, had influence, they could get you put in the National Guard or a military base and do your service without ever leaving the country. That's not right either. So until you get rid of all of those stipulations.
Yeah, but
I understand.
Yeah, but that's that whole.
We should know. We should all be.
Until it's perfect, then it's okay for it to be not perfect in the meantime. And I don't like that, because that's the whole, well, until we can get it exactly right, then we might as well not get it right at all. Or until we can get it, all right, we might as well let it be a little wrong to make it more right. I don't know. I think there's a point at which we muddy the waters too much by saying, well, we're not going to do this until. But
your question was, do we not allow for conscious objectors then? Right. My answer is, you're right. No, we would not allow for them.
No exceptions.
Right.
In other
but
words.
if we're going to have these other exceptions, then you also, I'm not muddying the waters. If you're going to have if you're going to allow for all these other exceptions that I mentioned that were real during the Vietnam War, then you also have to allow for conscientious objectors. Yeah. That's my.
You're saying it's either or.
If it were a perfect system, then I'm okay saying conscientious objectors are eligible for the draft. But as long as the people in power are going to take care of their own children, then we have to allow for other people to speak up for their beliefs.
So, right. I get what you're saying.
Vietnam's really a horrible, as the history person here, is a really horrible example to use.
Well, that's part of the reason I bring it up, is because there was a lot of, depending on who you ask, there was a lot of things that happened in a way that they shouldn't have happened, right? So it's a good example of there being a system and the system not necessarily working the way that it's supposed to work.
Right.
And so it just goes on with this idea of, I get what you're saying, and it's good that you made it clear to the listeners. It's either there are exceptions or there aren't exceptions,
right.
But there's not there's some exceptions for the people that we like, and there's no exceptions for people who are poor or whatever.
Or conscious objectors or religious
The problem
beliefs.
is, I think we have to hedge toward there's no exceptions, because you get into so much of that subjective, which is part of why we saw so many failures in that time period of the government can come in and say, well, no, Lance, I don't think your religion says that. And you can say, well, I think it does. And that's where we end. I mean, there's no, at some point there's no more facts. It's just a matter of me saying what I think versus you saying what you think.
I either go and serve, I go serve time in jail, or I leave the country at that point.
Which then is still, you've broken a law if you come back because you fled the draft.
I'm okay with no exceptions.
Right.
Personally, I'm okay with no exceptions.
I'm saying I think that's the way it would have to go, because as much as I like the idea of protecting conscientious objectors, I think you're still going to have these holes, pretty sizable holes in the system, as long as you allow unobjective, subjective exceptions, ones that can be interpreted very vastly, on why you're objecting. So let's move on from that. The next thing comes to, as it stands today, right? Women are allowed to now serve in any position that men serve in. However, they're not drafted. So then.
Well, they haven't been, because they haven't been able to serve. We haven't had a draft while they've been able to serve.
No, but the way that the selective service system is set up right now is the only people that are required to register are men.
But for a draft to take place, there has to be a new law passed.
I know.
So okay. I'm just making sure our listeners know, because what's on the books now isn't what's going to be used if there ever is a draft in the future.
Well, it might not be, but we don't know.
No, there has to be a new law.
I know what I mean is, I'm saying they could
just because they're making you sign up, that's
before.
just 1984 Orwellian, so that they can follow the males. The government just hasn't gotten smart enough yet to require females to do it, so they can follow all the population.
Gotcha. Yeah. Why do we have to register for selective service? I mean, don't we have like just a general
so they can find you.
I know, but We have to file taxes, right? I mean, everybody, the government knows our age. It knows where we live. So why do we have to take time to?
That was the last place they found you.
Well, yeah. That's assuming, okay, so I register for it when I'm 18 and then I go off to college and I don't ever update it. And well,
that's the fallacy of our government. Yes,
yeah, exactly. So my point is, I don't know. It's one of those things I don't think makes a lot of sense.
Well, it was put in.
It's like registering to vote, right? We all accept that that's the way it is. But when you think about it, how many other rights you have that you have to register for?
Right.
Not many.
But remember, that was put in 40 or 50 years ago and hasn't been looked at.
I know. I'm just saying.
It's like when the British sailors sued.
I'd be okay getting rid of it. Just
sued
like
for his pint of rum a day after he'd served 10 years because it was still on the English books because they hadn't taken it off in 400 years.
Yes.
So maybe it's something we should readdress once the government opens back up.
Okay. And so we only have a couple minutes left. So we'll end with this. You said we're all the same in the respect that.
Well, I haven't gotten to my founding fathers yet.
Oh, I know. You got to get to we're running out of time. Well, I'm going to skip this.
Well, I told people that we would do that.
I know.
You held me off.
I'm saying we're going to get to that. I'm going to skip one of the things I had to say so that we have time. So go ahead. What do we got?
Well, from Thomas Jefferson himself, he said, nothing is more likely than that the enumeration of powers is defective. Then let us go on perfecting it by adding the way of amendments to the Constitution that those powers which time and trial show are still wanting. So he never thought that this document that he helped work and write was by set in stone. It was like, I mean, even talking to Count de Mostier in 1788, Thomas Jefferson said, we hope that a favorable moment will come when we can correct what is amiss in the Constitution. So he's admitting when we wrote this, we got it down. Okay. Yeah. And we know it's not perfect, but let's hope in the future we can continue to, knock off the edges and sand it down and perfect it as we go along. That's been the intention the whole time, which is going back then how that applies to the 14th Amendment is that people, citizens, and we're supposed to be protected by these things. And I think Jefferson would say, yes, this is
Jefferson being a conservative and our third president. Yes.
Yes.
I'm just, I don't want to assume that everybody knows
who Thomas Jefferson was.
Right. But I mean, maybe they know the name, but they don't remember exactly.
And also Secretary of State under George Washington in the first administration under the Constitution.
And generally regarded as a founding father.
Right.
A very important one. And then we have John Adams, right? Mm-hmm. Second president of the United States, first vice president, important founding father as well. He says the way to secure liberty is to place it in the people's hands. That is to give them the power at all times to defend it in the legislature and in the courts of justice.
Talking about liberty meaning freedom, folks.
Yep. The right to do as you please, which would involve, and this is where we'll end it, Lance,
serving in the military.
Exactly. And this is where I know we debated some of the legalities of the way this is being handled and how it's being handled. But I think, Lance, you correct me if I'm wrong. It all comes down to the same thing on this. If you can meet what we need our soldiers to do, then I don't care who you are, what you look like, what you believe, you should be allowed in. And I'll say this, as someone who is part of the LGBT community, I would tell others that the way that gay marriage was legalized, air quotes there, that's not the way I wanted it. And that's the same thing on this. It comes down to part of what I've been sharing with Lance is I want Congress to, pardon my language, to grow a pair and do their job. This should not be something, in my opinion, that the courts even have to consider. Our Congress should stop playing around and take up these hard issues instead of offsetting and say, oh, well, we'll blame the court because they stay there for life and they don't have to run for re-election. Because to me, that's what's happening with stuff like this is that. And on that note, Lance, people can engage with us. How can they listen?
Well, first of all, amen. I'm right there with you. I'm not a member of the LGBT community, but or if I said that incorrectly, but I strongly support everything that you said there. And that's exactly right. That if you feel that you should be serving, then you should be allowed to serve. That's what what I think is a great country is all about, is that you should have that ability and freedom to do those things if you feel so led. But if you're trying to find us, obviously you already have, but if your friends are trying to find us and they need to know, you can look on Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or any other place where you can find podcasts.
Lots of good places, right?
All over the place. And obviously you guys have found us, you know how, but tell your friends.
Easy to tune in. So do it. Go out there, share it at TrueChat.org on social media, all the great places. And
everybody's got a friend.
Yes.
I mean, I think
that was the challenge, right?
Everybody's
this
got
year,
one. Right.
Is we all have to bring at least one new listener.
So there you go.
I already got mine done.
You did.
I did that
on the first day of the year.
That's right. On New Year's Day.
Well, it's good when you're the boss and you get to make the rules after you've already achieved the goal.
Right. See, I did it, and then I thought, this is a good idea.
This is a good goal. I know what happened.
That's right.
I've been here long enough. I know how you work.
Yep. See, the donuts came today, right? So you're prepared for some kind of Ask
I
Friday.
know, yeah.
You know something's coming.
Another zero will be added to my paycheck.
That's right. The front end, right?
Yeah, as always. Yep. The first number's a zero and the last number's a zero.
All right. So we appreciate you all tuning in for the State of Us on TrueChat in Urbana. I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
Thanks so much. We'll see you back on Friday. In the meantime, be the change.